I'm not special. Yeah, mine's it just gives me the dialog box and doesn't record.
Okay, we're recording. So
Okay.
okay. So when I
Cool, thanks.
got to Macalester, we were just starting to begin our transition to Extron as a control system in our classrooms, and we had nothing on our network. And so GVE wasn't even an option for us. And so the first year or two, we started moving things onto our network and started to implement GVE. And ever since then, it was full speed ahead. And over the course of a couple of summers, we got all of our systems on the network. And when I first started at Macalester, our reporting structure was that AV services was through the library and the provost. And a couple of years later, due to retirement, I moved over to IT. And then we also took my position and we split it into two. So when I started, I was doing classroom support, but I was also doing event support, which was leading to 55 plus hours on average per week, which was getting to be a little much. Granted, I got to meet some pretty important people like the Dalai Lama and others, but it was getting to be a little bit too much. So we split the position into two, and I've been concentrating on classroom supports. And then in the summertime, I primarily manage upgrades and installations. And then during the academic year, I manage supporting classrooms. And we spent a good deal of time the first few years getting all of our systems on the network and being able to manage them remotely so that we'd be able to do a lot of stuff on the back end when a call came in about an issue. And we're able to ask a lot of questions prior to the time that I get to a classroom. I'm considered tier 2 support, and our students and our help desk are the first tier of support. And oftentimes they'll end up in the classroom before I ever do. They'll often take some equipment with them, like a portable projector and things of that sort, to get things back up and running if we have an issue that can't be resolved immediately. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to show a few things about how we're using GVE right off the bat. I'll explain a few things about how we set it up, which won't really take more than probably 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'm just going to kind of open it up to a discussion for the remainder of the time that we have. So this is our, oh wait, I have to, you can't see that unless I do this. So now let's share my screen. So now you can see now you should be able to see my instance, the global viewer here. So this particular one, as it's labeled as Ordway Field Station, is our one classroom space that's not on campus. It's actually over in Invergrove Heights on the Mississippi River. It's a research facility, but we set this one up so that we could also see this one. It's primarily used for a couple of classes during the academic year, and then it gets a significant amount of use in the summertime when there's a lot of student research going out there. This particular system has, and this is how it's set up. So we have a touch panel. There's a Blu-ray player. You can't see any status on a Blu-ray player because it's an infrared device. This device is a DTP transmitter. It's classified as a switcher, but that's an HDMI and a VGA transmitter. This is our switcher here, projector, and then this is the processor. Present moment, these are all showing up as green, which is a good thing. If they weren't, they would be red in one form or another. And this one right here is the projector, and if I hover over it, it's going to say power off. If I press this, it's going to turn it on. I have this column showing under lamp hours, and this is slightly inaccurate. This, like I say, this system's hardly been used this year, particularly because of COVID. I have our threshold set at 3,000 hours. The default when you import a system into GVE is 2,000 hours, but I set everything to 3,000. So that way I don't get a flag too terribly early. But like I say, this system's hardly been used this year at all. And it's showing up as 0 at the present moment. And then if I move further over onto my screen, here it's telling me who the manufacturer is. Here's the model. And then this device name, and you can change these names. And I'll show you a little bit about how you do that in just a second here. And then if it's a bi-directional device, it'll show up as highlighted here, which these are because we've got some serial and some Ethernet devices here. And then this, it says port here. It's a little harder to read just because it's so small, but Ethernet, infrared, serial, Ethernet. And then if I go to a couple of these other ones, so I set this up, we have everything laid out by building. And so this Olin Rice is our science building. And if you open this up like I just did, it lays it out by room. Now, I still haven't figured out, and Alex, feel free to chime in why this is numerically not in order, but I have it elsewhere. I do have it in order, but lays it out room by room. I've got a couple of cases here, and I'll show you one where we've got some hardware that the driver returns no feedback for us. These monitors, for one reason or another, the driver just doesn't return us any feedback, so it shows up as if they're offline. So they show up as if they're disconnected, but I can guarantee you that they are not. And all of these are all the different systems in these different rooms in this particular building. I also have set up, so this warehouser is our administration building. We have 2 systems in there. We have our boardroom and we have our admissions presentation room, which again, this year is not being used right now at all. The next tab over is for scheduling. I have a few things scheduled in here. So like you can schedule a system to power it. So this one here, I have this scheduled as a power down at the end of the day. This particular one here, I also have scheduled as a power down. This is a residential unit, and I've scheduled it as a power down towards the end of the day. This is some monitoring within the system. So like here, this one here says TP connection status. So it's controller offline greater than a minute. I figure that in more than a minute, the touch panel is gonna, if there's a networking issue, it's gonna reconnect itself. This next tab over is reporting, and there's a lot of different types of reporting that you can do. Some of the ones that we use are like for lamps, for power on, things of that sort. The system menu is one that is very important. I use this one here under this controller manager often. And this is what I'm looking at right here. If a controller goes offline, if we have a network issue, it shows up right here. I also use this right here for the version of firmware that our systems are on. But what I'm gonna tell you is this is, yes, we can load batch firmware for Extron, but these don't get reflected until you've uploaded the current version of your programming. So I can go and load new firmware once it's available, and I've downloaded it using ToolBelt for those of you that are Extron users, but it won't be reflected here until you have updated with GCP your programming that is on your processor. So remember that. So these ones here with the smaller numbers, these are GC3 programs. These ones here in the bigger numbers are GCP. And then there's a limited number that show up on a page, and then just move to your next page. Ours syncs to LDAP, and so we can put as many users based on their Macalester credentials. And what I wanted to show you here is this is one of our, this is out of Windows, but if I go to my program, as soon all of my drivers, the names of the drivers here as they're listed, this is what shows up in ExtronGVE. So however you name your driver is what will show up. And if I go to the beginning, where you name your processor, where you name your touch panel, and this system is our concert hall, so we have 3 touch panels. So I named it the type of panel it is, and then where the panel is. So this one is an Extron TLP Pro 725T, and it's in the control room. This one's on a podium, and this one's a backstage panel. This one here is a room. Let's see here. I gotta look at the name of it. Okay, this is a lab in our science building. It has one touch panel, and so I didn't. So all I did is I named it based on the model number of the panel. And so now if I jump back over here. And I look at Olin Rice, takes just a second to come up. Olin Rice 3, oh, it's on the next page. That particular one is this one right here where the monitors are here. So that's this one here. So the touch panel, TLP Pro 320M. Now, all of these you can look at. So if I click on the device itself, if I go to device status, Blu-ray players won't return any information because they're infrared. But the other devices in the system, you can get information from them. So like this system has a switcher in it. When you go into this information here, when you bring it up, I can actually do some switching right here. So right now, if somebody had an issue in this room, I can go in here, and right now I know that the switcher's connected to the system. Auto switch mode is turned off, which is how we do it. And I can look at, so video mute is not turned on. And I can also look at the inputs. Input signal status right now is on 1. And you can change, so if somebody's having an issue, and it's also basically muted right now, the volume is at 0 because the system's turned off, and that's a command that's within our program. So I can do that on pretty much any room. So now if I go back to room, let's pick another room here. And we can do that on pretty much any of these once they come up. The other thing that I can, so this is the DTP wall plate, same thing. I know it's connected. Signal status 1. So this is on input number 1 right now. And the actual switcher itself, and we'll come up in just a second. We're on input number 1, no source. So the system's not being used. Now I could set that to a different one, but like I say, the system presently is not on. There's nobody in the room. Now, one of the other things that we did this year, which I want to show, which is one of the things we did to deal with COVID. Let's get to this one. Is we launched this, which is a virtual panel. It's exactly the same thing as if you're standing at the touch panel ready to operate it, pushing the button and then being able to select it, you know, using your volume control, so that if somebody didn't want to touch the panel because of, you know, for one reason or another, they could do that. So they could operate it like this, or they could operate it from their phone or from their iPad. And then one of the other tools that we use for if there's an issue with a room is we're starting to put in our rooms something just like this. This is a Middle Atlantic power controller, is that we can power cycle a room if there's an issue remotely, just by turning it off and turning it back on. So, and then the other thing I wanted to show people in both programs is everything has to be unique. This is the name of the room, which you have to have for GVE. And then if you noticed in here, didn't want that to come up. They're all these names here so that you can tell them apart and they don't get jumbled together. That's this right here. That's this name. And then these components are all of what you are seeing within GVE. So, so when we look at, so let me forward it a page so we can look at that room again specifically. So when we look at this, these components right here are what we're looking at right here. That's how they get populated, is by having them in that folder structure. So from here on out, now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can talk. Oh, and then let me look at this room right here. So you have something similar in here. It just looks a little bit different. This is the GC3 platform, but it's the same type of structure. So here's your folder, here's your components. And again, like I showed before, you have to have a name to be able to import and bring it in. And so this import manager, which I sort of glossed over, all of my stuff is presently ready and it's good, but this is the last time I did an import of any of these rooms. But if this wasn't a green check mark, it would mean that the room needs to be re-imported. But right now we're not, but I've got a project that I'm going to be finalizing and continuing on this summer that will be re-imported, doing a lot of re-imports. Oh, and then one other thing I'm going to show you about is this part right here. This tree is this right here. It's called the tree manager. And that's this right here. So when you import a brand new room, it shows up right here if it hasn't been done before. And here's where these rooms show up. And this is where you create all of this stuff. And it just, and then there's additional information you can get from here. And I don't have any of this stuff set up to sync. You can actually let GVE manage your time settings and everything, but I'm not doing that right now because what I found is that In the middle of the night, once a week, all of your systems will completely go offline. And we weren't doing that because I have monitors set up that are notifying us when systems go offline, and I didn't want all that to be tagging us in the middle of the night and the weekend. And like I was showing before, that you can have your monitoring set up in there. The other thing you can do, which we also have done, and I'll quickly show that here, we have email monitors in here in our programs as well, where touch panels offline, switchers offline, projectors offline. And that is, for those of you who know the programming, I just have monitors set up. So like this is the wall plate transmitter, goes offline. It waits 15 seconds. If it's still disconnected, it sends out an email. And at this point, I'm opting to do that in the program for just about everything except for the processor itself. So,
hey, Mark, before you stop your screen share, I have a question about,
yeah,
I think I have a pretty good understanding of what you're monitoring and then
Yeah.
how it's configured and like what you're looking at it. Can you talk a little bit about how this enables the team?
Sure.
Yeah, like at what point do you say, oh, you know what, I'm pretty sure student workers are going to be doing this based off this, or other staff, and kind of talk about how it drops off, like where is most of the work happening?
So our professional staff all have access to that, and our students generally they're fielding the calls. We started out having our student staff have access to this, but we found that they didn't really have much of a benefit for them looking at it, because they could take a look at this and they could see that everything in the system was connected, but that wasn't giving them much information. So I mean, if a component fell offline, they could see that, but we felt that there was a faster response, that if the professional staff were to look and make sure everything was connected, and we sent the students to the room quickly to try to diagnose an issue, it was significantly faster to send them with a couple of cables, a portable projector, to try and get the room back up and running quicker. And then the professional staff can deal with some of these other issues that we deal with on the backside. And then maybe
Sometimes
by that point,
sometimes they show up and the issue's already resolved.
And sometimes they'll show up and the issue's already been resolved.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that's okay. That's kind of a win-win.
Well, exactly. It ends up being a win-win, because sometimes what happens is the faculty member had a bad dongle, or maybe they didn't there's something that they weren't doing right on displaying PowerPoint,
Yep.
or it was some very, very simple issue on their end. I mean, we find that maybe not 90%, but 75% of the issues don't have to do with the system itself. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's a cable, and it's not the system itself. I mean, I have this year I've replaced a couple of internal cables in the systems, but not very many. And most of the time, if we're replacing a cable, it's a VGA or an HDMI cable between the wall and the computer.
Yep.
And this is not going to detect those issues.
Cool.
So. Oh, and then this over here on the right, I set this up because one of the things was we wanted to know how often a system is getting turned on. And these device notifications can be whatever we want. So one of them here, power on, projector in ART 206, and then the date. Some of these are a little older, but here's a no, that's not it here. Got a couple here things where I've got some components that got some disconnect statuses. And if it shows up here and it's a disconnect, we're also going to get an email about that. But this is also, it's kind of a, it's a quick at a glance. And it's saying there's 29 notifications that are showing. It won't show more than that based on the amount of real estate that's on my screen. Excuse me. And so it's nice to see this here. If I have any systems that I uploaded new programs to and they need to be re-imported, they show up here. And then if there's any controller issues, they'll show up down here at the bottom. So here's an example of these the meter for the lamp. Here we've got 500 out of the 3,000 hours, and this view here is customizable. There's lots of other, so as you can see, all those, I've got a few of those checkboxes. There's lots of other things that can be put in that you can put in there based on how much real estate you have on your screen. I'm putting in there what I think is what I think I want on my screen. And so my colleagues that use this have set theirs up the way that they want as well. So, but we have found this to be very, very useful. I mean, I think when we first started using this, I think I put in two or three systems to start based on which ones we had put on our network because they were all independent before. And now I have every system on my network. And this summer, I mean, I think what we're going to upgrade this summer is are ones that currently are in here that are getting refreshed. So, and once the systems are done and they're ready to go is when we will, basically the last thing we do is we add them in here. So
Mark,
yeah,
for us, we're just starting with GVE. We've installed it, finally got it configured. We're putting all the devices into the system. As our first year of venturing into GVE, what recommendations, lessons learned would you have for me?
So you will figure out how you want to name your devices based on how you use the system. So you can make those changes as you I mean, nothing says that what you put in there that very first time is what you have to do, is what it has to be. So I mean, I took a look at so we don't do any installs in-house. We contract that out because we're not that big. I mean, our institution is 2,200 students, and there are only two of us AV techs in an IT department of about 35 total people. Okay. And so I took the programs as they are, put them in, and I'm like, okay, well, the way these are titled now doesn't make sense to me anymore with the way the different people who are using GVE. We'll take a look at that. So at first I started naming every single device based on what the room is. And I did that for like 6 months or a year. But then as you saw, you have that folder that has your room name. Well, so then I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of redundant. So then I decided that what I was going to do is everything was going to be named based on what the actual component is, so that I can quickly look at that and see, okay, so this is my Extron processor. This is my Sony Blu-ray player. This is my Epson projector. That's what made the most sense to me, so that when I'm looking at this at a glance, I can see exactly what the component is. And if that component has failed, if it's offline, I can figure out really quick when I go to the room exactly what I'm looking for that has failed. And one of the things that I noticed that is a really easy thing to try to diagnose is periodically you'll see that the DTP transmitters may potentially lose connection to the to the switcher, that's an easy fix. And sometimes it just needs a simple reset. But if there's too much wording in there, you don't want them to be too wordy, so that it's easier to read at a glance when you have maybe 5 or 10 minutes between class to do a quick fix. It's the easiest thing to figure out how to quickly look at it at a glance when you're on your way to the room. You've got 5 or 10 minutes to do a quick fix between classes and to get something back up and running. And this is pretty close to real time. So I mean, I could take this I'd take my laptop to a class. If a component's offline, I go and reset it, or I disconnect an Ethernet cable and reconnect it. Literally, all I have to do is refresh my browser, and it'll show when the component is back online. So I mean, it's that quick. And also that page that I showed about where you could see all of your processors at a glance. If you have a network issue, or if a port goes down and your networking team has restored a port, you'll see that go back online right away. Or if power went out, you'll see that stuff go back up right away. So,
okay, so one of the things that we're planning on using it for, and you didn't necessarily talk about this in your case, but probably about half of our calls come in from instructors not knowing how to correctly select the right input and outputs on the touch panel.
yep.
You know, they call up and say, "Oh, I pressed the buttons, but it's not showing." Or, well, actually, no, sorry. The call is the projector's not working. You know.
Where have we heard that line before?
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to give our phone support people the ability to actually log into the controller and actually say, "Okay, what are you trying to connect? Boop boop. Okay, is it on now? Oh yeah, it's on. Okay, great. Thank you. Have a good day." You know. Have you used that for that purpose at all?
So we have. So one of the things that I've struggled with is that one of the things that I've really struggled with to make work is that from that here I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna share my screen again, so from one of the things that I've really struggled to make work, and that's kind of why I showed this second tab of this. Actually, I'm actually just gonna turn this system on. This one is not a projector, and it'll take just a little bit of time to come on, but I set this one to take a little bit less time because it's monitors instead of a projector. So at this point now, so you something like this, right? So this, to get to this screen, so if I go to, let me go to the second, I'm going to move to the, come on, there. I'm going to go to
the classroom's not currently being used.
Oh, I know it is, because that's a computer lab, and we made a conscious decision this year to have labs. That lab is able to be used only remotely. So one of the things that normally that would bring up the panel, but for one reason or another, I either have it configured wrong or something's not quite working right. But in any case, so how you get to that is if you go to the IP address of your processor, and then you log into the processor. Okay, so I'm gonna back this up just slightly here, okay? Okay, so this processor, I keep trying to move the window of each of you around, and Did this one not here? Need to go. Went too far.
Actually, while you have this page up, did you create this spreadsheet manually, or were you able to import this information?
No, this particular spreadsheet is my master inventory, and I have been creating it as I've been going along. And so I've had quite a number of years to create that spreadsheet. Actually, the one I really wanted to get to was this one, because I shortened it. Okay, so my IP address 10.21.29.20.
Yeah, because eventually I'd like to tie the two together, the inventory system as well as the GVE, so that
Which you can do.
you can. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I didn't have to re-enter the. So once you've entered your password and your user ID, this is what'll come up on the processor. So you get your LAN settings, your device, the project information, and your firmware version that's on here. You have this right here where it says launch Extron control. And it'll bring to this page, and this right here, what it'll do is it'll launch a new tab, and it'll actually bring up the virtual control of the panel. This is for all of the GCP products. This is not for GC3. And since I've got it on now, so this panel for us, these are the inputs. I don't have anything. This particular system has nothing where so like there's no Blu-ray player or anything in there. So I have nothing where I'm using the touch panel for control. So this is my volume. The meter shows up and then it disappears after 5 seconds. And then that's if you do a display mute. We did this intentionally where they have to wait like 5 seconds before they can do something again. So that avoids the system of getting hung up, of it saying it's still on mute and then it's unmuted and so forth. The only thing on this system that will do this, so basically what would happen is somebody could log into this panel if they say it's not, and then they could select the input for them. So this one only has HDMI and VGA. We don't actually even have a wireless option in this space for them. Our wireless option on campus is using the Epson eye projection. We don't use Immersive Solstice. We got a couple spaces we use some Crestron Air Media. And then when we go to turn the system off, yes, cancel. And then we launched some accessibility features. Now, okay, so there's a bit of an echo because of using Zoom and so forth right now.
We can't hear the echo.
Okay, you can't hear. I mean, I'm hearing the echo, but maybe you're not. But so we launched some accessibility features this last year on all of our systems. So this is what our staff can use now to, if somebody truly gets stuck.
I agree, Mark, that this page is probably the most useful of anything that Extron offers to remotely monitor or control anything, but it is hard to get to. I mean,
I agree.
I never understood why they can't incorporate that into GVE. Then you just somewhere it's a button on GVE and the touch panel just pops up, and that would actually make it really useful for the help desk.
Yeah, and you can launch that page from the program too, but that's
Right.
you know
But
most people
that's
aren't going to have
even-
access to that.
That's even worse. Yeah.
Yeah, that's even more difficult.
And I've
So-
tried making a spreadsheet of the web, of the address links to every touch panel, even to, but I haven't. It doesn't always connect to them that way either. So that's something that yeah, would be hugely useful. I've had GVE since it came out, but I haven't found it to be as useful as you have. It's the main part. The worst part is it's just so much labor to get to the point where you're at. I mean, you guys have put a lot of work into this.
We did, and the summer that we put the bulk of our systems on our network, I can't tell you how many hours, because at that point we had probably 50 to 100 systems that were completely independent of our network, and the only thing in the room at that point that was on our network was a projector and nothing else. And so it was then taking that network line and adding it to the switch that was in the room for the rest of the system, and rearranging and then reassigning, and then adjusting it from, basically a closed independent system to being on our network.
Yeah.
But once we got to that point, adding the few new, we had a couple of years where we added a few new systems. I mean, and now it's like we do a couple, we might have a couple of systems a year, but that's it.
But you say you don't, when you send a new configuration to a room, you don't always update GVE, and so you get kind of behind in that. That's easy to do. That's another thing I wish it would do, is to, once you send that new configuration, have the control processor update GVE automatically. I mean, that it seems like something that would be doable, but that would make it much more manageable.
One of the other things we're looking at right now, which we haven't done yet, is, and part of it is because we don't have certificates for all the hardware that's on our network, is putting a QR code in each room for all of these to make it easier for people to access the web GUI if they don't want to use the panel. I'm not sure what I noticed the other day, that the iOS app is no longer the iOS app is no longer available in the App Store, and it's had a few issues, but I know the Android app is still available.
Yeah, I could just quickly chime in on that. I don't know too much of the reasoning behind it, but there were some issues with the version that was out.
Okay.
Right. So if you have an older version, like you didn't update, I guess, to that last one, you'll be okay. But the last version, there was some problems with it. So they did pull it down. It should be coming back up, I would imagine, by next week or so.
Okay.
I was told by the end of the month it should be back online.
Okay. Yeah, because what we did, one of the things we did due to COVID this year was we launched use of the iOS and Android apps to our faculty that are actually here on campus,
Right.
for those that didn't feel comfortable walking into a room, touching a panel, because of that, that might be another point to, another germ point. So, and I honestly don't know how many are actually using it, but.
Mark,
Yeah.
A couple things I was going to ask about. So we're planning to do GVE last summer, and obviously the world stopped turning, and it's not quite clear how much it's turning right now. So this may not happen this summer. But a couple of the things that I'm interested in is, does it give you an ability to do firmware updates more easily and without actually having to go out into these locations? And then can you do any kind of global reports of button push data, and as opposed to piece by piece? Can you get something overall, say for a building or something, and know how many projectors have been turned on?
So as far as global firmware updates through GVE, no, you can't. You'd have to still do that through ToolBelt. The only information you can get is where I pointed out the processor information. You can look there to see your firmware version, but there again, that's going to be based on the program that's on the processor. So update it via ToolBelt, but then you can go back to that same page and it's still going to show you the same firmware that's on. It's still going to show you the same firmware version even after you've updated it, until you, because generally firmware comes out, a new version of GCP usually accompanies those firmware updates, right? And so then what happens is you update your firmware and then you have to update your program. You don't have to update them in tandem, but for GVE to realize that the firmware has been updated, you have to push a new copy of your program to the processor. So it won't realize that the change has happened until you pushed a new updated version of your program. And then what was the second part of your question?
I'm wondering if you can do any kind of global reports, analytics on button pushes.
You can. Now I've struggled with that. I've struggled with that a little bit, but yes, you can. Let me go back to that here. I'm gonna do the. We'll do this a little bit again here. There is a spot in.
Yeah, I'm curious about the same thing, because one thing we were thinking we could track this for is how often are they using the house computer versus the laptop versus the document camera, and tracking the inputs on that.
We
Yeah,
want to get
that's-
our VCRs, so we're waiting to see if we can actually get VCR usage down to nothing. So
Exactly that. Yeah, I was
You
gonna
know-
say that's what really is like the driving point on all that stuff. I mean, I
So
came from higher ed world too, and trust me, I used it back in the day to get rid of VCRs and the combo units and things like that.
So one of these reports that I don't remember if I created it or if it was here when we turned it on, is this report right here that is a button press report. Now I probably don't even have it set up correct, but you can set up button presses based on a variety of different credentials. You can go input source, you can do by location. You can set it based on day, month, year. I have been trying to set some up last year as well. And so, okay, so I just want to, it's not gonna run any based on that, but yes, there definitely are some on there, and there are ways, you certainly can. I have to, here, all filters. And then the other thing that you can do is you can set them based on the different types of displays. And then you can also do it based on the different types of devices. I mean, it's, so to answer your question, yes, you can. Because you can set the parameters based on your building, based on time. So yeah, there's a lot of different options here so that you can get those. So I mean, we were looking at that at one point, and apologize that I'm struggling a little bit to figure it out, because we were looking at that at one point, and I had one running at one point just to look at like VGA or wireless, and you can narrow that down also a little bit. So like if some of yours are named a little different, you can consolidate those names down too. So like if you've got a room that has like dual inputs, So like it says VGA front, VGA rear, and you want to consolidate that down just to see who's still using VGA or who's still using a VCR or who's using wireless, who's using HDMI, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Oh,
but
no, that's okay.
It's kind of one of the, it's both a selling point as to why I want to do it, but it's also, it's such a powerful thing. Getting the time to get a handle on all of this is clearly going to be a challenge. And that's why I've got to think about, is this the summer to do that? Or am I going to be building more hybrid rooms, and that's what I got to focus on. So,
yeah. So a couple of years ago, so I mean, we did take a look at that data a few years ago, and we used the data on VGA to determine that we weren't going to be putting in VGA in our classrooms anymore. So our standard classroom went from HDMI, VGA, Blu-ray, and wireless to HDMI, Blu-ray, wireless. And that second HDMI now is a conversion cable that converts that HDMI to a USB-C on the other end. So since there really isn't a whole lot out there yet as far as direct USB-C. I mean, yes, Extron now has that USB-C device that'll charge and convert to HDMI. And I know that there's going to be more coming to the marketplace within the coming months and years. But we made the option to go with a dual HDMI and just use a conversion cable to USB-C. So,
yeah, and that's what I'm looking at is, with budgets and so forth. If I can get data, there's certain people who make the decisions on funding. If I can show them data on how often a projector is used in a room, et cetera, that's really useful info to have. So that's why I'm looking at this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mark, can you even turn off individual projectors with GVE?
Yes.
I mean, last time I set it up, there was an all off button there, and I was told all you could do was send an off command to every room at once, and that didn't.
Here, let me show you, Dana. No, you don't have to do all off. You can do them room by room individually. So right here, this button,
yeah,
will turn this one off, this one room individually. Power off. So it'll also turn, well, in this state it would turn it on, but if it's on, so like this room right now is on.
How do you know it's on?
Actually, I know who's teaching in there right now. So if I did that, it would turn it off in the middle of this presentation.
How do you know it's on?
So if it's on, it turns it off. If it's off, it turns it on.
It's green.
Oh, just by the little pop-up. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So if it's green, it's on. If it's dark like this, it's off. And so whatever state it's in, it'll do. So if it's off, it turns.
There, I'll reopen all of the rooms, so that should show back up. Whoops.
Well, now I have to take an action here. It's asking me to join, so.
You don't have to, you can ignore all the joins can be ignored. My apologies, everyone. I inadvertently closed all the rooms, all the breakout rooms, when I was going to send a message and say, come on back.
Okay, so is it in the same breakout room as we were in before?
Well, now we're going to the 131 now. So no, this will be different. It just wants you to go back to where you
Then
came
why
from.
did you send me the 1231?
Because I inadvertently closed the room and that's where you were last. So you can just ignore that and not join it and go to the 131s now.
It sounds like a passive aggressive way to end the session there, Tom.
It was very effective, Tom.
Fine,
I'm just in charge. So we ended ours a little early, so we couldn't mess it up for us.
Well, once I saw that Matt was here, I knew everything else had to be done. So I ended it for you all.
Well, would you mind sending me a link to AV bridging?
You should be able to select it in there. Do you see it inside your breakout room for the
Oh, wait,
AV
I'm
bridging?
going to go there now. Now
Okay.
Already record.
Tim, are you recording this one?
Somebody else already pressed record, it looks like.
You did, okay.
I don't know who though. Did you, Matthew, did you record already?
I did not, unless it's continuing from before.
Perfect timing has jumped in.
It's
One
Dana
second.
who is recording.
It is. Oh, that's a continuation from the last breakout. I was recording the last one and then he cut us off.
You should stop the recording then, Dana, and then just start another one.
I will do that.